Hi everyone, nice to meet you all. We'll start in a few minutes. Right now I will add our speaker for today my session. So yeah. Hi, yeah. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Good evening, Michael. How are you?
Okay. Nice, thank you. Yes. So it's Friday. It's the last day of a week. So it's Friday sometimes hard for product managers, I think.
Always a joyous day for employees across the world.
Yeah, so a lot of guys join our conference, and we stream here on Zoom, and also we do the streaming on YouTube. So guys from our YouTube community also join us. Yeah, so I'm very glad to see all participants for today. Our session. So I think we'll wait for a few minutes and we'll start. Yeah, and we discuss some questions. We get a lot of questions from our community, and I choose some of the most interesting one to discuss. Yes, so let's do it today. I'll share a screen with the questions. So yeah, everyone joining us. So I think let's start. Uh, I think for a start, you can say for our participants some words about yourself, about your work, about some your background as a product manager. Yeah.
Sure. So hello, everyone. My name is Zubin. I currently work as a senior product manager at Flipkart, where I head the demand planning, forecasting, and machine learning team. So here we're primarily building automated products for purchasing, demand forecasting, placement, everything which makes so that you can buy your stuff from e-commerce on time, get it delivered on time, all of that stuff, with lots of data science and machine learning components thrown in, obviously both to improve the outcome as well as to keep on advancing the processes. My career as a product manager has gone through many stages. So I didn't start off in product management. I started off working in finance. I later ran my own venture, my own startup, did that for a few years. Post my startup, which sadly did not take off, I moved into product management. So I've worked in product management in advertising and online classifieds. I've worked in e-commerce. I've worked for supply chain and logistics products. So a pretty wide range of product experience on my side. And yeah, looking forward to sharing whatever I've learned with you guys today.
Cool. Yeah. And how many product managers at Flipkart right now? Is it like 10, 50, 100, more than 100 product managers?
Sure, I think it's more than 100, more than I know for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so it's really interesting to check questions from our community with you, with your experience, with some of your suggestions. So let's start with the first part of questions from our community. It's part about product manager's career. So let's see. The first one about moving from project manager role to product manager. Can you share some ideas maybe for with our community how to move from one role to another, and maybe which skills do you need, or maybe which experience will be helpful for a person who want to make this move?
Sure. So let me take a stab at it. So I think the first common thing which everyone should need to know is actually the good part about product management is that it's a very open profession, right? There
Yeah.
are people in product management from all sorts of backgrounds and places. So there's literally no background of yours, which would rule you out from becoming a product manager. So now roughly the difference, say, between different types of roles which have the word manager appended to them is pretty much uh, regarding what specific aspect of management you're doing, right? um, Project management, classically speaking, it's almost like a predecessor of product management, right? In the
Yeah.
sense that software companies have had project managers well before they had product managers. And there is, there's a bit of a translation of the role, right? Whereas earlier you would have been responsible for tying up and getting deliverables done for
Mhm.
some complex software project. The same thing is definitely a part of your product management duties, right? Wherever it is you are, whether
Sure.
it's at a startup or at a big company. So on top of that, probably what you want to work on is aspects of your product thinking which are not relevant to a project, right? As a project manager, one commonsensical idea is really that you're running a project whose ideation and concept has been done by someone else.
Hmm.
But in product management, you sort of own this entire pipeline, right? You got to think of a solution, whatever it is. Though it could be a product, it could be a feature, and you have to figure out, how it works in the current environment, and then you have to deal with the aspect of bringing it to life, getting people on board, getting stakeholders on board, your team working, a roadmap which delivers a functional product in time, all of that stuff. Then
Yeah.
there's a post-product life cycle. So yeah, so it's you can start off fine as a project manager, and it's more a question, I think, of taking your thinking forward.
Hmm. Cool. Yeah, I think it's also about prioritization, for example. Yeah, because the project manager do not do like prioritization. He get task from product, from CEO, and as a product manager, you need to work a lot of on prioritize task and
Exactly.
things. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Cool. Let's check the next question, and all our audience can also ask question in real time in the chat here or in YouTube, and we will also check new questions. So the next question is quite similar. So it's about journey for first-time product manager. So maybe some casings to focus. Is it how to get maybe first experience as a product manager? Is it what is the maybe best strategy to be like junior product manager? Is it about to get your own like small startup, or is it about to go into some big corporation to get some experience? Or do you have maybe some suggestions about some journey for first-time product managers?
Sure. So obviously there are lots of paths, right? Like you mentioned, startups, one path. There are a lot of big companies which have ramp up programs for product managers now,
Hmm.
uh, junior product manager or APM programs, which exist to groom product managers within the environment, right? So I think all of these are valid, approaches to startup, right? So
Uh-huh.
I think the only thing for the person to remember should be that they might lead you in slightly different directions, right? uh, in much the same way there are different kinds of products, right? um,
Mhm.
you know if you start off in a startup or a venture, right, it equips you with a certain skill set which comes in useful in some kinds of product scenarios, right? um, Things which are market facing. You got
Yeah.
to think on your feet, things like that, right? So you sort of naturally end up developing a skill set which biases you towards a certain kind of job, right? The other side would be, let's suppose, a kind of product manager who works in a very structured environment, has got a lot of processes to follow, right? Now both of these things are useful for different outcomes, right? So
Uh-huh.
maybe if you're sort of going to be a PM, a good way to do it would be simply to work backwards, right? To think about where you want to end up, and then start off given that outcome, right? If you're looking for things like general business leadership, you want to be a startup founder, you want to go down that path, right? Then starting in a small startup or a very aggressive environment might be very good for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas if you want to work on lots of very complex projects, things like complex engineering, people, lots
Hmm.
of heavy resources, takes years to finish a product. Then perhaps working in that more structured environment, which enables you to do these slower paced but larger scale stuff, might be good. So work backwards. That's what I would suggest.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you. And let's take one of the questions from our Zoom chat, so I can write it. What is the role of technical product manager? What is the difference like between a role of technical product manager as usual product manager? Where is the boundaries between these two roles? What do you think about this question?
Sure. So it will vary obviously from company to company, right? Because
Yeah.
different companies have got different definitions. But roughly, um, there are two major differences, right? The first one is really with your skill set, right? That the technical product managers supposed to have a much higher level of technical competency, right? The rough overlap is a TPM is to a PM from a skill set what an architect is to something like
Hmm.
an engineering manager, right? The two
Yep.
have slightly different roles, but there's an expectation of expertise, right? Which makes one a contributor versus a manager, right?
Hmm.
So it's something like that, for those who are familiar with that distinction. The other part really is in the type of products that you're working with, right? Where there's really
Sure.
a
Yeah.
wide and visible gap. Yeah. Because as a product manager, you could work on any kind of product, but a lot of your products will really be customer facing, right?
Hmm.
UX, UI, even technically complex but customer relevant stuff like search, recommendations, things like that.
Hmm.
Whereas the technical product manager is frequently working on products which are never seen by the end user,
Yeah,
right?
like internal
Yeah,
products, like
exactly.
authorization or something like
Or
this.
data lakes, heavy
Yeah,
duty, scalable products, backend systems, things like
some
that. So critical stuff,
CRM
but
systems
yeah,
also. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So critical stuff, but things which people may often not see directly. That's usually what the nature of the job involves.
Yeah. So, as I understand, the main boundaries is about type of product. Firstly, yeah, is it customer face product or it more internal and more
Yep.
hardcore product? And the second one, it's also somehow about skills. Yeah, about skill
Hmm.
sets. So, as a technical product manager, you should have more understanding about technical things to work with your developer team more.
Exactly.
Cool. Yeah. So let's go to the our next question. It also some question about PM pass. So what's let's check this question. Uh-huh. uh, Engagement manager with product manager. How to share some gift notes on PM interviews. So it's a question more about PM interviews. Maybe you have some ideas, some suggestions how to better um, thinking about interview. Yeah, how to work between uh, for interview. Yeah, what do you need before? What do you need to do before interview as a PM
Sure.
manager? Yeah.
Sure. So there's two questions. I'll answer both because I think the first one in particular is relevant to a lot of people from an Indian audience, right? The
Hmm.
service sector problem. Okay. So let me just deal with that. So obviously there are a very large number of Indians in tech who work primarily in service companies rather than in product ones, right?
Yeah.
So actually the case in this problem, right? Again, it comes down to what we had just discussed at the start about you not being the decision maker, right? which is really, the place where your product thinking sort of doesn't develop, right? And it's also sort of the missing link when someone, say, from a service industry background, goes for their product interview, or for a PM candidature, right? Because you sort of come from a background where someone else, made the decisions, right? They decided what would work, what they want, the bets that needed to be made, right? And you were then, sort of lining up on the execution standpoint, which is valuable, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what will come from that in your PM interview is that people will spend extra time figuring out whether you really can make these decisions on your own, right?
Mm-hmm.
Have you, sort of developed your product thinking, to a point where you actually understand all of these fundamentals, right? So let's come to the second question, right? The PM interviews and roughly how they're structured, right? Now, in smaller companies and startups, obviously they can be in a wide range, but in large companies, PM interviews are reasonably well structured, right? They usually follow set patterns like, can you problem solve? Do you have product thinking? There'll be a technical round, to judge whether you have technical acumen, which will, be adjusted to the team, which you're expected to be joining. There'll be a leadership round, to assess can you get on with, businesses, higher
Mm-hmm.
level
Yeah.
stakeholders, things like that, right? So the thing is that the good part about all of this, right, is that it's reasonably predictable, right? Most
Mm-hmm.
largest companies follow exactly the same structure. They'll, call it different things and have different jargon, but it'll follow the same template, right? So what you can do is really prepare according to this template, right? You
Uh-huh.
know that, if you're problem solving, you've got to deal with real world problems, right? And it's a case as simple of, being aware of product issues, right? Like for instance, if everybody's talking about, for instance, let's take a hot topic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's suppose everybody is talking about how Facebook and political ads, and how can you tell or verify what's true, what's not true? Should they be doing that, right? That's a
Mm-hmm.
problem, right? If you're a Facebook
Some
PM,
cases, yeah, yeah.
exactly, right? And you got to, start using your own imagination. That if you were a product manager and you've got all of these, choices to make, do I shut off the targeting?
Mm-hmm.
Do I, try to build some AI ML layer to, gauge what people are talking about? Is
Yeah.
it correct? Do I cap, the shareability, or, put brakes on it or something, right? So this is roughly, the kind of situation which you're likely to, get hit with in a product manager interview, right?
Mm-hmm.
Facebook, and with people will always take, well-known solutions, right? Nobody wants to, have an interview with someone about a product which is niche, or, they may not have heard
Yeah.
of, right? So it'll always be something popular, something you're likely to have encountered as part of your general interaction, right? And then we want to see, how you think around that, how you develop solutions, or even solve the problem away through some good product idea or something that you have. So yeah, that's generally how PM interviews go.
Yeah. So, as a suggestion, I think we can recommend to working on some cases. Yeah. So you as a junior product, you can find some cases and to try to work on these cases. Try
Exactly.
to make
Yeah,
some
that's a good
decisions
idea.
on these cases.
Hmm.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I also after our IMA session can send some questions with cases, and you can train yourself to make some decision on these cases. And I think it really help you on interview, because work of product manager is more about decisions. You should do like 100 decisions per every day, I think. Yeah.
Exactly. Even if it doesn't look like it, right? It's all about the decision, right? It's
Yeah.
about
So
even if you're not the decision maker, right? You basically a decision seller, right? So you have to sell the decision that needs to be taken to stakeholders,
yeah.
get the buy-in. So yeah, it all revolves around that.
Cool. Yes. Thank you for the answer for this question. And we got some question in our Q&As section, so I can read it. So question is about how to be data-driven or analytics product manager. So I already have 10 plus years product manager experience. Does it helps to some certificate on analytics, AI, ML? If yes, which one? So ultimate goal is to crack PM interview in Flipkart or Amazon. So how to start? Maybe some moving to getting some skills in data-driven product managers. Yeah.
Sure. So, I think some certifications and qualifications they do help. Okay. Because mostly because if you don't come from a place where you've done real world problem solving, it helps
Mm-hmm.
to know that you've done some work on the theory. Plus, it's a signal of your intent, right? That you're serious about
Yeah.
doing it. You put in some effort. All of these things matter, right? Now, considering that you're already a product manager, right? I'm guessing you've already done loads of work on different types of products, right? Because 10 years is a long time. And the basic thing that you've got is you simply want to just marry some of this knowledge, right? The theory knowledge that you get from your certification with your understanding of the practical problems around developing a product, right? So you already would have known, for instance, if you work on any UI UX problem, you can imagine a
Mm-hmm.
lovely UI UX, right? But if you try and execute it, you've got XYZ problems, right? Something which looked good on paper turned out to be confusing to a user. Something which was obvious once you had a final product did not make sense once when you were busy conceptualizing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So your entire product life cycle has to account for these real world problems, right? So if you can stretch this, right, to a data problem, to an analytics problem, right? Like if everything's a model, for instance, right? How would you set up services to deal with the fact that models are complex, many variables? How does it differ, right? A service architecture which has to do a compute cycle is very different, from a service cycle which simply has to return a value. Okay, so your technical, thinking has to take several leaps to accommodate that. Your user experience is very different, right? If you a user experience which is giving choices is very different to something where the choices are being evaluated in the background and
Yeah.
the user's only getting
Mm-hmm.
a flow, right? So it's all part of a process, right? And I think getting this extra learning will help. And obviously, if you merge it with what you already know, it should give you the right basis to move
Mm-hmm.
forward.
Cool, yeah. And as some additional, I can recommend to tell to meet some guys who already are working on AI and ML products and discuss maybe some what different challenges do they have, what different types of decisions as a product managers they have, and
Yep.
yeah, and what maybe different some type of soft skills they need to do to discuss some ML decisions with their technical team because it's differently. Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah.
cool. Yeah, let's move to the next question from our community. So it's about product manager's resume. How to it look like? Mm, yeah. So, well, for example, some junior product manager first time want to create some resume. What is on your mind, on your opinion, the main parts of the resume? So, if you as a senior product manager will see some resume, in which part are most interesting for you, for example?
Sure. So, for me, what I always want to do is obviously pick out the bits from your resume, which strike me as an interesting problem to discuss and go ahead with that, right?
Hmm.
And I know for sure that most people, who are higher level product managers will do the same thing, right? So the big tip from the resume, obviously, is that it's actually your opportunity, to lead the discussion, right? To lead the interview.
Hmm.
So if you've been good with crafting your resume, right? If you've put the little tidbits there, right? And obviously it's good if you've done product management before, so you've got nice products or something, some initiative to write about. But even if you don't, right, what you've just got to do is put something interesting over there that we can start a conversation over.
Yeah.
That's really the best part of it, right? So let's take an example. Let's take somebody, who's straight, let's suppose out of university or something, right? No working experience of
Mhm.
product management, right? But they might have worked on something, which is a cool project, right? A cool university project, which could be related to, and it could be technology related, right? It could be something
Uh-huh.
like you solved a cool engineering problem, or you solved even a process problem, or you've even done something interesting like a festival or an extracurricular activity.
Mhm.
And even such seemingly unrelated stuff, right? Let's suppose you word it to the point where you crafted a process out of it, or you reoriented something to pay attention to a core customer need or demand, right? That's actually all the lead up you need to start having a good product discussion, right? Because you as a candidate are displaying to me that you're already trying to think
Yeah.
in terms of running your own ship. You're paying attention to what your user base is, what your customers are, what they want, how they work, how they think, right? And it goes from there. So it's very much an organic process, most product management interviews, and you have a really good chance to really take stage on that one.
Cool. Yeah. So I have a really similar thing when I do as a chief product officer interviews with some candidates on product manager role. So for me, the most interesting thing is about some kind of mindset of a person, some kind of how do they uh, somehow about decisions making, yeah. And
Yep,
I need to find something in his or her resume to ask about how do you did these decisions, what kind of decisions you met on your road. Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. So I think in conventional speak, right, there are lots of different kinds of resumes, right?
Hmm.
And the product management resume is closest to, let's suppose, being your functional expertise, right? So something that you got expertise in, plus
Uh-huh.
the generalist parts of being a product manager, right? Because it's
Hmm.
got to be like say technical plus something. It's got to be user plus something, business plus something. So
Uh-huh.
yeah, I think a well framed resume with a good amount of thinking behind it is a very good investment, for your product management interview.
Cool. Yeah. Also, I hear some question about some examples of interview questions. I think we can write some examples after our IMA session into our WhatsApp and Telegram group. Some examples for our audience. Yeah.
Sure, sure.
Okay, let's move to the next one. It's the last question about some interviews, and next question will be about other things. So it's some question from a person who has a lot of years in product managers, near 10 years, and he was on interview, and mm, let's check it. Very strong. I ask prior experience on e-commerce. Mhm. Uh-huh. So it's, as I understand, it's questions how to get some maybe e-commerce experience. Yeah, because on
Mm-hmm.
Flipkart, of course, uh, you need some e-commerce experience. It's better to have it. Yeah, maybe how to get some e-commerce experience. Maybe your some suggestions to some guys who want to, uh, yeah, go to interview on Flipkart or other e-commerce big company. Yeah.
Sure, sure. So okay, so I mean, there's multiple ways to tackle this, right? Obviously, like for instance, this is an experienced person, but it sort of starts coming down to what are sort of the trade-offs, if any, you are sort of willing to make or that you want to make, to sort of make this kind of transition, right?
Mhm.
Now let's take some of the most straightforward paths, right? Like one very straightforward path towards getting e-commerce is to work for a startup rather than a big company, right? Startups are always more open to different talents.
Uh-huh.
The primary need is always for people who are clever and are willing to work hard, right? Much more than any domain expertise. And from my
Mm-hmm.
experience as well, it counts for much more because people can learn fast on the job. And in startups, things are always happening. Your learning rate is
Yeah.
like 10x of a large company, right? So that's one way. I don't know if you want to go down that path, but that path is always there. Other alternatives, are obviously things like, say, start off with a smaller company first, right? Who will
Mm-hmm.
value your large experience, right? May not be a huge company, right? Another way, for instance, is the question of, what's the level that you want to join in? Are you willing to take a level cut, or join laterally rather than joining up, so that you have a buffer to learn, right? More intelligent ways might be, for you to be able to find these niches, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where your particular experience dovetails with something that another company might be looking for at that point, right? Like let's suppose you go join a large company. Let's take a theoretical example like Google. Okay,
Uh-huh.
now Google does any number of initiatives, right? And for 80% of Google's history, they would never have required, say, someone who comes from a banking or a financial background.
Mm-hmm.
Then a few years ago, someone in Google decides to launch Google Pay because that sort of thing is happening in India, right?
Yeah.
And suddenly Google's got a market, right? For hiring people who've got fintech backgrounds and banking backgrounds and all sorts of things, compliance related backgrounds, right? all,
Mm-hmm.
all of these things open up, right? So one smart way, obviously, of doing it is, you've just got to watch and prepare, for the right opportunities, right? Things which dovetail with your skill set, with your domain expertise, right? And
Yeah.
when these opportunities come up, you've got to use them, to your favor, right? So there are lots of ways which are open, to make these lateral shifts, and you just got to, be intelligent and make the most of the chances when they come up.
Cool. Nice. So thank you for this answer. So let's check our next question. It's about it's also interesting question about product vision and how to work if you have in your product multiple revenue streams. Yeah, for example, it can be subscription and advertisement monetization. Yeah, and
Hmm.
do you
Absolutely.
have
So,
some experience and do you have some ideas about how to work with this?
yep. So I have every product actually, the caveat to actually understand with this is every product which is successful actually has multiple revenue streams.
Yeah.
Okay. Even if we take an e-commerce company, an e-commerce company's revenue is not actually restricted to
Hmm.
retail sales. E-commerce companies monetize, through ads. They monetize through resellers. They monetize,
Uh-huh.
through deals. There are loads of things, right? Of which there's usually one main channel, right?
Hmm.
There's something which is obviously providing the bulk of your revenue, and then there are subsidiary channels, right? So let's talk about, say, product vision, right? Vision is a vague word. Let's just rather reduce it to the product function, right? Which is a more
Hmm.
direct word. If you go to an e-commerce site, if you go to Flipkart, if you go to Amazon, right? The product's function is always oriented around the main business channel, right? It's ludicrous to think of a Google homepage which is, not oriented around search, right? Even if Google makes money from YouTube or other things, right? Simply because it's the dominant flow. Same with Flipkart, same with Amazon, same with everything else, right? So it's very much, part of this whole prioritization, stack ranking, decision making game, right? That you have to align your product to your business model in the order to which things are functioning critically for you. Okay. Now, sometimes this may actually be an indirect system. Okay. When I say an indirect model, you may be, say, getting loads of people coming to your site for a free product. Google's a great example, right? they all come for the search. You push up the search. You're monetizing through a totally different channel, which is advertising. Okay. But though it seems to be separate, it's actually not, right? If you didn't get people coming for search, if they weren't searching, you wouldn't be able to pitch products for them, right? So even in places where there seems to be a disconnect between the user product and the monetization product, actually the two are critically linked, simply because if you don't monetize, your product doesn't have a future, right? So your business model has to really work exactly in tandem with your product vision, right? And this should work ideally in a forced stack ranking, right? Based on whatever business is most important for you, right? Which could be multiple, but there'll always be a prioritization. This could either be of the revenue itself, or it could be basis the strategic goals which you guys have internally, but there will be a priority, and that's what your product should reflect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's more about priorities, and firstly, you should think about your main revenue stream and make some features and changes about this mainstream, and then add some like second and third revenue streams features
Hmm.
about.
Yep.
Okay, yeah. Uh, let's move. uh, Also, interesting question. What is like future prospect of success as a product manager?
Okay, that's a vague question. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay. So let's think about it in this way, right? I'm sure you as a person may have your own goals and ideas of success. If you look at success as a product manager, then obviously if your products are successful, that's great, right? Product success has very wide meanings, right? Some people measure success by how many people are using it, but
Yep.
if lots of people are using your product because there is no alternative, that might be great for keeping a job, but your product's not necessarily very successful,
Mhm.
and you may not be thought of as a very good product manager, right? So it's a very wide, it's a very subjective range. It's sort of the point where you sort of it once you're there, right?
Mhm.
I would suggest it's more a question of if you're meeting your personal goals, if you're intellectually stimulated, and you've always got a clear path in terms of what you want to do, right? You're already there. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, so I think it can be really different prospects. So you can think in terms of quality of your product and happiness of your customers and users. You can think in about some of your career perspectives, or you can, for example, move to some startup and driving some startup or start as entrepreneurship. Yeah. So
Hmm.
it depends really it's really personal things, I think. Yeah.
Yep, totally.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay. Yeah. So question for you. First time setting the goals and identifying the market. So can you maybe remember this time?
Oh
Or
yeah, yeah, I remember it very well because it was actually for my own company when I started up
Mhm.
for myself. Yeah. And it was so my first time, right, was a total mess up. Okay. And I did exactly what the classic MBA graduate does, which is to Google,
Mhm.
start pulling up lots of consultancy reports and say, oh, this sector is going to be this high. The sort of
Uh-huh.
stuff which you see in the news every day. Wow, this sector is projected
Yeah.
to be $500 billion. Oh, wow, billions of dollars. Yeah, all over the place, right? And it's a total mess. Essentially, all of I have to say it. All of the information is wrong. Okay, so if there's one thing that I really learned, it's never trust a research report. That's one of my critical learnings from my first time setting the goals, right? So if not that, it's pretty much a hit and miss. I would say rather than you say that there's a clear method, right? Many people I think get it closest to the right part when they say that you should really evolve your own process, right?
Mhm.
Just say that, this is what works for you after a few hits and misses. Uh, some people like looking at financial metrics. Some people like going out, talking to people on the ground. Many people just do some combination of all of these things, right? Which is good, right? But you should have a system in your own head. And the benefits of having that system, right, is that over time, right, you'll actually be building up your own consistent data set, right? That I thought, I'd always ask this question. I've asked so many different answers to this question over, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, 10 years, right? And I can see over this time that, these are, the relevant points which are being extracted from this, right? Which is really the core of the analytical approach, right? That you take it upon yourself to set out an analytical framework with some assumptions, some rules, right?
Mhm.
And you keep on adding data to your own framework, right? It could be qualitative data, it could be quantitative, whatever it is, right? So that over time, these patterns that hopefully you can leverage start to reveal themselves. And yeah, I think that's the only secret to it. So that's it.
Yeah. Okay, and we have one more question in our Q&A section. So the question is, I can read it. So far, I seen as a finance or technical persons are preferred for top jobs. Why so? If product managers can climb up the ladder of CEO.
Hmm. Uh, so that's actually not correct. In fact, most of the people now who are CEOs of major top companies, let's take, say, Google, Microsoft, are both
Mhm.
actually product managers. Um, Most of the job profiles of people who are leading, tech companies who are not founders, in that sense, are
Mhm.
almost all product managers, right? So the product management track in the technology industry really is sort of the CEO track, right? In the same way that certain tracks like, say,
Yeah.
trading or investment banking are in the banking industry, right? So you've got multiple functions, but there's always one leadership track. And the reason for that, simply put, is that the design of technology products require their own sort of management,
Mhm.
and this whole hierarchy of people called product managers has now emerged to deal with these problems, right? Finally, the ultimate problem, which is how do you run an entire company with all the stakeholders it involves, building a product which has market relevance and can make money. Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty much the state that we're in. Product managers also, however, if we're talking about long-term career perspectives,
Mhm.
there is a lot of branching, right? People from
Yeah.
different backgrounds join product management. Product managers branch out and do different things. So in a sense, one way to think about it in terms of hierarchy is that the concept of product management is really only strict at a middle level. Okay.
Mhm.
It exists at a middle management role or level. There's no, what, unlike, say, for instance, engineering, right? Where there's a clear, development level, there's an outsourcing level even below that, there's a management level, and there's a leadership level, right? So that sort of, pyramidal structure actually doesn't exist for product management. Product management only exists at this middle level, right? At a lower level, there's no requirement of it. At a higher level, it merges with more general leadership functions, right? Like CEO. Product
Yes.
managers also become CFOs, things like that. So that's pretty much what it is.
Mhm. Cool. Yeah, absolutely agree with you. So I think it can be a part, like product manager job can be part of road to CEO.
Yep,
It's
yep.
okay. Yeah. Uh, Interestingly, about how can product goals can change in a company after M&A. So I think it's not about only Flipkart question. It's a more general question. How do you think can change company or product goals after some acquiring of company, of some startup, of a big company? Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. So I think it's something which everyone is aware of because there is always a change, right?
Mm,
And it's straightforward, right? Because the company which has acquired you has done so with some specific purpose in mind,
yeah.
right? And they always want that purpose to be fulfilled. Um, so yeah, I mean, if you're acquired by another company, obviously the first thing that will happen is that your product's goals will diverge to dovetail with whatever this vision is, right?
Hmm.
You may have started off as a consumer facing app, but if somebody has bought you, to utilize, say, your backend technology, which might be very good in some horizontal way, then obviously, as time passes, you'll see you're becoming more and more a backend focused company,
Hmm.
which is, all focused on APIs and integrations and providing services to
Yeah.
other front end providers, right? So it happens, right? I think in the case of the Walmart Flipkart case, it's been relatively less, right? Because it wasn't so much the Flipkart product which Walmart acquired. It's rather the Flipkart market share, right?
Hmm.
So in that sense, Flipkart is actually doing almost everything exactly the same as it was and in the same way. So yeah, it's a business acquisition in that sense rather than a product acquisition. So yeah, but still there will be various
Yeah,
impacts,
so
right?
so
Like
so it
yeah.
depends of type of acquisition. Yeah, it's about
Yes, yes.
business change, or is it about market share, or is it about some strategy?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
cool. Let's check to our final questions. So let's move to the one of this. Oh, yeah, it's a really interesting question. So I
Mm-hmm.
uh, yeah, let's check it, and I also can share some my experience about this. It's usually hard to remember about own failures, but yeah, but it's
Mm-hmm.
useful. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'd say before we talk about biggest failure, right? One thing I'd say is that a commonly quoted statement is that 99% of startups fail, right?
Yeah.
But if you actually think of every startup is at least one product, right? And there are many more products than there are startups, right?
Hmm.
Actually 99.9% of all products, right, everything anyone ever attempts to make or create actually fails. Yeah.
Yeah.
And even as a product manager in a large company, or whatever is the place where you're trying to develop or do something, most of the things which you're trying to do will probably not work out, right? And you got to be prepared for that, right? That's actually the first mental preparedness for you, right? So for me, I guess if I'm to talk about one of my biggest failures, right? One thing which is always sort of stuck in my mind was actually the period just after I had scored one of my biggest successes, right? So the success was actually we did a lot of work on performance services, backend services, for user experience, right? To give them a faster, more seamless user experience. And this did such a good job that it took what was at that time a loss-making company into a profit. So great, wonderfully done. Then I changed, what I was doing, and I moved to a totally different kind of product, right? And I was full of this success, and I thought, I found a formula. I should just replicate it, right?
Hmm.
And the reason why, I think it was, a big failure because the replication did not work. In fact, it was a total bomb, okay, which just wasted people's time, for 3 or 4 months, is because, I felt that, I forgot my own principles, right? I forgot the fact that I was supposed to, think independently, see what the local problems were, understand, what the solution could be, or spend any time at all actually doing that. Instead, I took something which I found worked, right, and thought that it would just work if I could just do it over and over again. So it's really a failure of product thinking on my part, right? There are other failures that I've had, right? I've had stuff which didn't meet product market fit. I've had a startup which failed. I've done lots of things, right? But in all
Yeah.
of those things, I've at least done my best, right? I've tried to figure out what might work. I've made conscious decisions on, picking one, leaving another, right? And sometimes they work, many times they didn't work, right? But it's this particular case is a big failure for me because I just junked all of the things which I should have been doing to try and duplicate a success which I'd already had. So yeah,
Mhm.
that's definitely a big failure.
Yeah, yeah. So I also think that product managers have a lot of failures because it's like a part of of their job. Yeah, because you make a lot of decisions and you do not have like 100% information to make these decisions. That's why you make some failures.
Hmm.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
yeah, and I also have a lot of failures in my career as a product manager and as a chief product officer also. And I usually remember about some my failure. It was like 7 or 6 years ago. We have really nice idea, and we do some small startup inside a really big company with 10 100 plus million users, and we make a really big team, but we can't integrate this idea inside into a big company. So it's one of the
Hmm.
part of failures. And I think I can understand about this on the start of our internal startup, because we do it like 1 or near 2 years to make all of these things with a real big team. And yeah, we
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes it just doesn't happen. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Ev-
it's
ev-
it, it's
ev-
hard. Yeah.
Yeah, every PM has that fist bump moment with other PMs about whatever they've messed up. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Okay, let's check the last question of our IMA section. It's for our like new product managers, guys, who ask, can you maybe share some ideas or share some resources which maybe you usually read, or some courses which use some product managers maybe. Yeah, or give some suggestions for new product managers.
Sure. So I think there's just a few things which come to my mind. The first, best resource is just your everyday experience, right?
Hmm.
Because people now are using products every day. Food
Yeah.
delivery, cabs, search, right? So the first core learning for you is to just be observant, about your own actions, right?
Hmm.
They are just, themselves revealing, both the visible parts, right? The things that you're doing, as well as all the hidden parts, right? Suddenly,
Yeah.
you go from A to B, nothing was visible, but something must have happened in the back end, right?
Hmm.
So all of this in its own scope is just revealing to you how products are structured, how somebody must have set them up, constructed them, made some sacrifices and some choices, right? Whatever you feel like you want to complain about, that's a potential feature, right?
Uh-huh.
Whatever you don't even think about is a really well designed product, right? So maybe you just want to think about that and pay attention to it for a minute, right? So
Yep.
that's one. Another thing I think is to just read and interact, like this session, or there's lots of everything is surrounded with product knowledge nowadays, right? You've got blogs, you've got media, you've got
Yeah.
videos, yeah, people sharing stuff. So it's always good just be part of this to know how people are thinking, how
Hmm.
people are talking, what's in fashion right now, right? Product is very fashion dependent, also, by the way, right? Both product and startups, both, right? There are certain things, which can only happen once, a certain time has come, right? You could never have had a product like Uber if smartphones hadn't come first, right? So
Hmm.
it's always, a very moving trend. It's about, what's happening in the now, which is going to affect you in the near future. So yeah, that's another thing. And third, I think, anything that you've got to do in terms of the more you can do hands-on, right?
Hmm.
No substitute for that really, in terms of product management as a job, right? Because it doesn't come with a qualification. It's not technical like engineering. It's not network based like sales or marketing, right?
Hmm.
It's really, a leadership aspect, and without actually having tried to lead something or do something, whether it's a small project or whatever it is of your own, right? You'll always be missing some of these key experiences, and
Yeah.
it'll always show, right? The fact that the more you think of a decision as being an academic activity,
Hmm.
rather than being a human activity with lots of real world consequences for people involved, not least yourself, right? The further away you sort of are from getting the challenge which is actually faced. So as sort of practice it and develop that sense of yours, you'll keep getting closer and closer to what it is that sort
Uh-huh.
of needs to be done.
Cool. Yeah. So it's less about somehow reading blogs and more about like real activity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like trying
Yep.
to do something and so on. Yeah, because it's
Mm-hmm.
more about some experience. Yeah, and maybe less about some knowledge. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So it's a last question of our IMA session. So I really want to say thanks personally to you for your time, for your suggestions, for our audience. It was quite useful and really cool that you find time to share your ideas, to share your experience with our audience. And yeah, so thank you one more time about this.
Sure. Thanks, Michael. It's great to be here. I'm always happy to answer questions, and just hope that over time, product community and the product thinking just
Cool.
keeps
Yeah.
spreading and gets bigger and bigger. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we share this video with our community also. And if some guys send to our community some questions, I can resend it to you, and you can suggest some other ideas on other questions. Yeah.
Sure. Happy to contribute. Great.
Cool. Yeah. So have a good Friday. Have a nice weekends, and thank you one more time. And goodbye. And a nice weekend for all of our participants of our AMA session. Yeah.
Thank you. Great to be here. Bye
Yeah.
bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.